Okay, let's get into module one, which I think for a lot of people, it's going to help set the stage for the rest of this little mini course I put together. And I also think it can be a little bit of a rude awakening for some individuals to realize you actually don't have a BD problem. More often than not, it comes down to how you set up your day, your week, your month, and your quarter. So ultimately, it comes down to the structure of how you run your desk or how you run your business that will ultimately drive revenue forward, get you new clients, and get that BD engine humming. So in terms of what we're going to cover in this particular module, we're going to talk about the difference between busy and productive and how some people can actually fall into the trap of feeling like they're very productive when in actuality it's just busy work, which is activities that ultimately do not drive revenue, right? We're looking to fill our weeks, our days, our months, so on with RGAs, what I like to call revenue generating activities. And we're going to talk a little bit about the three categories that are more likely than not eating up most of your day, that we're going to have to learn how to do a better job of managing that. Ultimately, we want to figure out what a good week look like. And we also want to talk about what a bad week looks like, because the sooner we're able to identify that, the sooner we can turn around a bad week into a good week. And then ultimately how we can take a good week and replicate that success over and over again. Ultimately, too, from the hundreds of recruiters that I've talked to, and I've worked with this point now over 30 plus recruitment firms, the common trap that I do here is I'll do BD when I have the time. More often than not, that is someone who runs a desk just lying to themselves, because they'll say, I need to find candidates, or I need to do sourcing, or I need to do some other activities, which, do not get me wrong, they are important, but we should always, 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 always ensure that within our time blocking systems, BD is part of it, because the trap of I'll do BD when I have time ultimately leads to no BD getting done. And then lastly, we'll finish up the module with what your first activity can be, or what the first things you can work on, and it'll feed into module 2 from there. So busy and productive, I already said this before, they are absolutely not the same thing. Most recruiters, when they are in a rut, they feel like the next script or the next template or a different tool is what's going to turn things around. If you are watching this now in 2026, the biggest thing over the last month or two, obviously AI has been a big deal, but one of the biggest things has been OpenClaw, and how there's now all over my LinkedIn feed, and really anyone you ever talk about, they're talking about how these magically revolutionize everything that you do. And I see a lot of people falling for that trap when in actuality, it's not needed right now. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we need to get our foundation in order first before we look to add and layer on tools on top of that. I personally believe, as you see there with the second bullet point, the actual problem is almost always comes down to your structure, how we're setting up our week, how we're setting up our day, our quarter, so on and so forth. Because without structure, you ultimately end up going all over the place. We end up stretching ourselves far too thin, and we end up going absolutely nowhere as a result of that. Busy does feel like progress, and it ultimately really isn't. And some of the things that I've listed down here as what can feel like being busy but isn't actually productive is responding to emails. I know some of the clients I've worked with, they feel like if they're not on their emails, or they're not on their LinkedIn DMs, they're not getting back to people within a few minutes time, it's not helping them in their business. And what I've learned of my years, if someone's not calling you on the phone, if they're sending you an email, they're sending you a LinkedIn DM, it's not an immediate drop everything, take care of that right now. More often than not, we can close down our emails, we can close down our LinkedIn, we can focus in on specific tool or specific activities we're doing and block out the rest of the noise. Updating your LinkedIn, this is another one too. We feel like we're being productive. Another one is sitting around and unnecessary calls. This is obviously if you're working for an organization, sometimes you're going to be stuck in some meetings, but also ask yourself, is it a productive meeting? And if we find a better use for our time, or if we can find ways to not be part of meetings that we are not needed in, I ultimately recommend and encourage that as well. As it says on there, like none of these things are BDs. None of this stuff will actually pay you. This is stuff that just eats up your time. It's not an RGA. It's not a revenue generating activity. And as I have down here is one of my quotes. I'm moving myself over here. If you can't point to revenue generating activity before noon, you had a busy morning, you don't have a productive one. You've wasted really the first 4 hours of your day, maybe longer depending on when you log in, doing busy work, but we're not moving the needle forward. We're not generating revenue with some of the activities we're doing. So here's all the things that feel, 3 things that I put down that feel like work. Tool management, switching between platforms, updating trackers, fixing integrations, right? I had a client that I worked with. He had like 10 different tools he was using. And once we started to kind of peel back the onion of what he's actually using, it came down about 3 or 4. Not only was he burning a ton of capital on tools he wasn't using, he was also switching between task or tool to tool throughout the course of an hour throughout his day. And as a result, he never really got in the groove or in the rhythm of doing anything. And as I have here, every tool switch does cost you 20 minutes of focus you can't get back. They've done studies. If you haven't read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, I highly recommend it. Ultimately, your brain needs to be single focus. We all want to think we can multitask. It's just not true. If you multitask, you end up doing multitude of tasks at a mediocre level. We're geared to focus on a single thing at a single task at a time. And if we're switching from one thing to another, aka one minute you're on the phone, the next minute you're writing emails, the next minute you're creating LinkedIn content, what that actually leads to is a degradation in your work. And it also makes it hard for your brain to get into the groove. And think about it. If you've ever been into deep work, locked in, and someone interrupts you, and then you try to get back to that deep work, it typically takes, they've done these studies, it takes 20 minutes around that time to actually get back into that like flow state. And by switching between tools, you're just doing yourself a disservice as a result. Fake urgency. I put this down here and talked about a moment ago with like having to respond to emails. Many recruiters treat everything like they need to put out a fire. They feel like I have to do this, I have to do it right now. Almost nothing is as urgent as it feels. I work for 2 of the largest staffing firms in the world. We did a high volume contract staffing. I worked within blue collar settings where we're talking, we would have 30 people going on site on a day one doing picker packer. So with those roles came a lot of administrative work. The only times where it was truly urgent was when the client called me. What I realized over the course of my career, because I used to keep my email up, I used to think it was great to have it on my phone and respond within 5 minutes. Ultimately, it was a distraction. And if someone was emailing me somebody or someone was sending me a LinkedIn DM, it really wasn't that urgent. If it was, hey, we need to take care of this thing, we need to take care of it right now, they would call me. So do not treat everything as a category 5 fire. We have to put it out right now, because ultimately that's distracting you and getting you away from doing more revenue generating activities. And then reactive scheduling too, as the last one, right? People let other people build their days out for them. Meaning you don't protect time on your calendar. You will allow anyone to interrupt your day. You will bounce from one thing to another because someone emailed and you feel like you have to drop that to work on something else. Like, you need to be protective of your time. And I know that can be hard, especially in recruiting, where there can be candidate schedules and client schedules we're working with. I understand that, and we'll talk about this a little later on. But ultimately, we do have to have some times on our calendar that are devoted to us, ourselves, and our BD development and our BD processes and systems to get going. Because if we do leave our calendar open for everybody, they will take advantage, delete up all of your time, and then we get to the end of the week, and you ask yourself, what did I actually accomplish during this week? And as I have down here, right, one of the quotes I would tell some clients is, the day doesn't fail you, your structure does. So the difference isn't effort, is my opinion, right? It just comes down to structure. And what I want you to do, as we're about to wrap up here, module 1 on the next slide, is I want you to think about what was the last great BD week you had? Like, what was different about that week? If I had to guess, as I put my own couple thoughts on here, you had protected time on there. You had clear targets. And I say start earlier in the day, meaning start earlier in the day in terms of your BD. I'm not a big proponent of you have to get up at 5 a.m., do a cold plunge, and get to work at 6 to start your day. I have 4 kids. Look, I think that's just not necessary. I do think, though, when I say start earlier in your day, I think focusing on the revenue generating activities, getting that stuff done earlier in the day is important, because if we wait to the end of the day, your willpower gets chipped away, you ultimately get distracted, and we don't have the energy levels needed to perform a high value activity at its fullest capabilities, because we've been exhausted and beaten down throughout the course of the day with a million things we have to handle. And think about your worst day too, right? There's obviously the best, but what happened on those bad days, or excuse me, bad weeks? My guess is, again, my couple 2 cents around this is something urgent came up, again, urgent quotations, and we felt like we had to handle it, and ultimately it wasn't that big of an urgency. BD kept getting pushed. We kept telling ourselves, I'll get around to it. I have to do this one more thing with a candidate, or I have to do something on my LinkedIn, or I have to leave some comments, and ultimately kept getting pushed. And then Friday rolled around, and we realized, hey, we didn't do any outreach. The outbound engine completely came to a stop for the last 5 days. I did nothing to drive revenue forward, whether it was growing revenue in already existing clients or out there trying to sign new clients as a result. The effort might be the same. I have this simple, right? The effort might be the same between those 2 weeks. You might have said, hey, look, I still worked hard and I believe you. What probably was different though was the structure you would set up your week and your day to day as a result. And when it comes down to it, this course, I'm not going to ask you to pick up the phone and smile and dial for $100. I'm going to ask you to put in 80-hour work weeks, right? What I want to help you to do is take your effort levels and put structure around it. So that way we can move forward in the right direction. Going back to what I've said 100 times already, and you'll hear me say it 100 more times in this course, revenue generating activities. RGAs is what we're looking to do more of and get rid of less and less and get rid of more of the administrative work. So the trap here, this is kind of like my warning for you as we kind of work throughout the rest of this course as well. Time doesn't just appear, right? You either protect it or it gets taken away from you. And when I say taken away from you, it gets taken away from distractions, it gets taken away from other people, it gets taken away from a variety of other things. Ultimately, it's up to you to guard your time, your calendar, and what you want to accomplish from a day-to-day and week-to-week perspective if you want to grow your business. As I said, I'm just kind of repeat too, right? Every day is the same hours. I know it's cliche, but those that are doing BD, the people who are doing BD consistently, they're not working more and longer hours more often than not. Early in your career, you might have to do that. Don't get me wrong. But more often than not, they're just structuring their days and their weeks different. And they're being more effective, right? Going back to what I said, they're being productive. They're not just being busy. Leftover time too, right? For BD, it's a complete myth. There is no leftover time to work on BD. Something will always fill it up, right? The urgency always feels like it's real. And by Friday, as I've said multitude times before, the week's over and you realize I've just wasted 5 days of an opportunity of getting my brand and myself, my company, and the opportunity to try to win new clients has disappeared. And 1 week out of 52 is already gone. The problem then, of course, becomes we have to restart the engine next week. And if we don't do that, one bad week becomes another bad week. It becomes a bad month, ultimately to a bad quarter. And you're really, really behind the 8 ball as a result of that. And ultimately, the fix isn't a discipline issue, discipline or motivation, right? I've had some people tell me like, oh, that sounds like a motivation issue. Absolutely not. It comes down to a better system. And if you've ever read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, talks about it all the time. This is a quote from here as well. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you do know how to have the right systems and the right structure in place, there's no motivation or there's no discipline in the world that'll help you overcome bad systems and bad structure. Because we are human beings. We are not robots. We have our ups and downs. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. Motivation's going to be high one day. Motivation's going to be low. Discipline's going to be high another day. Discipline's going to be low the other day. The thing that makes people successful, whether it's in business development or sports or in life in general, is having the systems and structures to fall back on. Because on the days when they don't feel motivated to hit the gym or pick up the phone or whatever thing that makes part of their life hard, right? Because some of the stuff I'm talking about is difficult work. They will ultimately not get around doing it because systems aren't there to catch them on those days. The motivation isn't there to push them forward. So to wrap up this first module, what I want you to do is take 5 minutes right now, right? I want you to write down the last time you generally had a productive BD day. Again, be specific about this. As I say, what was different? Like, be specific. Where were you at? Were you in the office? Were you at home? When did you start your day? What did your day look like? What was the environment around you? What did you have going on, right? Having this stuff written out will help you start to identify what a good BD day looks like for you. We can build more structures and systems around that. And ultimately, like, what got in the way of every day since that one? Like, the last time I had a great BD day, maybe it was last week. And now since then, 3 more business days have passed. What got in the way? What stopped you from having 2 good business days in a row? Start to identify those things because those patterns will repeat themselves. And if we can spot it now, the next time it does start occurring, we can nip it in the bud before it becomes a bigger problem. As I say here, hold on to that answer because then we're going to use that as we jump into module 2.